lot going on. I'll take it from here. Connell, thank you. Have a great weekend. Hello, good evening, and thanks for being with us tonight. I'm Blake Burman. So the presidential draw. President Trump kicking it with the leaders of Mexico and Canada. But did they call off sides on trade and tariffs?
We've had a tremendous relationship, working relationship with Canada. We have our Prime Minister of Canada there, and we have our President of Mexico. The coordination and friendship and relationship has been outstanding.
What Mexico's president is saying tonight after her first face-to-face with Trump. Plus, Plan B. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. getting his wish for a vaccine involving your kids. What it means for moms and newborns. Also this evening, the newest shot in the Hoosier State. Are Republicans about to give Trump his wish and 2 more congressional seats? Chris Steyerwalt is with us in a bit, and tiny cars. Why the president is throwing his full-throttle support behind vehicles that are just like this. Do you want those on America's roads? But first tonight, the big draw with the U.S., Canada, and Mexico face-to-face. A glitzy Kennedy Center ceremony celebrating the first time the U.S. will host the World Cup in some 3 decades. But the moment also met with some big political issues. And as you see there, 3 world leaders.
I'm going to meet with both. And we're getting along very well. You know, we're getting along very well.
Now, it's the first time President Trump has met with the Mexican leader, Claudia Sheinbaum, as he tries to tackle cartels and rework trade deals. All smiles alongside Canada's Mark Carney, even though the president has called all sides and tried to fend off tariffs to our neighbors to the north. With all of this, let's go to Kelly Meyer live at the White House with what we are learning this evening. Hello, Kelly.
Hey there, Blake. It looks like some sort of game show as they were standing there behind those colored podiums. But President Trump just getting back to the White House after spending much of the day over there at the Kennedy Center, taking in the 2026 FIFA World Cup draw. The president seemed to be enjoying himself as somewhat of this master of ceremonies, but it wasn't all sports. There was some diplomacy happening on the sidelines. President Trump meeting with both Canada's Carney and Mexico's Sheinbaum. Mexico's president writing this on X shortly after, saying she had an excellent meeting. She said, we talked about the great opportunity that the 2026 FIFA World Cup represents for the 3 countries and about the good relationship we have. They also spoke about trade there as well. So we are watching to see exactly what more comes from this meeting in the days to come, if this does result in some sort of new trade agreements or, you know, as there's been concerns about immigration as well. But we do know it seemed like it was a pleasant conversation there with the leaders and the president, Blake.
All right, Kelly, and then you've got all these cities all across the United States that are going to be hosting these World Cup events, East Coast, West Coast, middle of the country as well. The president had been threatening to potentially yank the games if he didn't like what was happening in those cities, but he walked off that a little bit today.
Yeah, he was asked about this today at the Kennedy Center, and they said, you know, you mentioned that there was some crime happening in these cities. Have you considered maybe moving the games from those specific cities? And this is what he had to say.
No, I don't want to do that, but I will tell you, if they do have a problem, by the time we get there, we'll take care of that problem. We can solve that problem. I've proven that in D.C. and everywhere else we went, so we'll take care of that very easily. So if they have a problem, hopefully they'll let us know that, and we will solve any problem.
The president clearly really excited and focused on these FIFA World Cup games happening in America, in North America, across the world, watching this as it happens and unfolds here right in D.C. today. Blake.
Kelly Meyer. Live tonight, 1600. Kelly, thank you. Well, a court appearance just down the road. Nearly 5 years in the making. The 30-year-old man accused of planning explosive devices in Washington, D.C. on January 5th, 2021, the day before the Capitol riots, finally seeing his first day in court. Now facing 2 federal charges with potentially more on the way. Our Joe Khalil live outside the courthouse tonight with what we're learning about this man. Joe?
Yeah, Blake, literally a day, 5 years in the making, as you mentioned. Brian Cole now in court for his first hearing. He didn't say a whole lot today. He was mostly answering questions from the judge, identified himself. The judge laid out the two very serious charges that Cole is facing: possession of explosive devices, one count with intent to cross state lines, and another to do great bodily harm and potentially even kill. He's facing up to 20 years, the judge says, if he is convicted. The prosecutors made it a point, Blake, today to say that for 4 hours last night, Cole was cooperating, answering questions from federal agents. And a source familiar with that conversation told us, confirmed to NewsNation, that he told investigators he was, in 2020, a Trump supporter who believed that the election was stolen, which may speak to motive here. He's going to be back in court on December 15th. There may be more evidence against him. We know that prosecutors say that they're continuing to collect more evidence. Right now, they've already said that agents have been able to place him at the DNC and the RNC based on his phone records and based on his purchasing records. They know that he was at Home Depot and bought the items that ended up going into these pipe bombs. So the case against him is building up. We know that much, Blake. Again, he's going to be back in court in a couple of days. One more notable thing, his family was in the courtroom today when it was all done. They shouted toward him, "We love you."
Joe Khalil, live tonight outside that federal courthouse. Joe, thank you. So with Cole now in custody, one of the questions remains, why did this take so long? The FBI Director Kash Patel saying today, in his view, it was a matter of the administration prioritizing the right things.
What we did, an investigation spearheaded by the Deputy Director and the ADIC of our Washington field office, brought in a new team of investigators and experts, re-examined every piece of evidence, sifted through all the data, something that the prior administration refused and failed to do.
Joining us now, former FBI special agent, CIA officer as well, Tracy Walder, NewsNation national security contributor, and Charles Marino, former Secret Service special agent, former advisor to the Department of Homeland Security. Hello to you both. Thanks for being here. Charles, you know how we do things around here. Sure. Ladies first. So Tracy, I start with you. Kash Patel basically saying, you know what, we prioritize this. And I think it's a legitimate question to ask. Why did it take so long to track this guy down? Was it simply that this administration prioritized the case and the prior one didn't?
Well, thanks so much for having me, Blake. I think it's actually a couple of different reasons. The first, I want to say, when I graduated from Quantico, one of my very first, I guess, jobs or assignments actually was looking at older cases that were, anywhere between 5 to 20 years old, because agents had been assigned to them for quite some time and they wanted fresh eyes on them. So that's actually a very, I guess, normal and standard procedure. I think a couple other reasons is the type of device that was used. Obviously, I'm not a bomb expert, but he did go to big box stores to procure those. And that takes a really, really, really long time. Also, the copious amounts of interviews. It takes a long time to sift through all of that. Sometimes the more evidence is good, it just takes longer.
Charles?
Well, to Tracy's point, I think two key words: urgency and resourcing from the Trump administration, demanding that this case be solved and bringing in a fresh set of eyes to look at all of the evidence. They're very clear in stating the fact from DOJ that there was no new evidence and no new tips that led to this arrest. So the evidence was in possession and it was being looked at. But sometimes you need fresh eyes to take a look at this.
Is the fresh eyes standard operating procedure, or is that priority? Tracy?
Is the question?
Well,
sure.
sorry.
To Charles's point, is I wouldn't say it's standard operating procedure, but what I will say is it's something that is done with some frequency if you have what we call a stale case.
So you mentioned the sort of the trail of evidence here. Pipe bombs bought in 2020, kitchen timers as well, end caps, electrical wires, a 9-volt battery connector, steel wool. Here was Jeanine Pirro, the U.S. attorney here in Washington, D.C., just yesterday, and then we'll pick it up.
You know, folks, this case involved millions of pieces of data. And it is a huge win because it was like finding a needle in a haystack. So much of this evidence was very specific, but a lot of it was also very general.
So they were able, Charles, to get the cell phone near the bombs at the time. They did a height analysis. They were able to track down the tag, right? All of that. Is she right? Was this a needle in the haystack?
Yeah, it always is. Look, you had two things here. You had the physical evidence from traditional investigatory steps that you take, and then you had the digital evidence. And we know that there was an overwhelming amount of digital evidence. And whether or not everything was scrubbed to the point of satisfaction in terms of existing evidence is something that sounds like it wasn't done under the previous administration. So the fact that Kash Patel and Pam Bondi demanded that they go back and look at things like cell phone data dumps and other forensic geolocation information is very telling. And ultimately, they got to a final decision here. But the investigation is going to continue. By no means is it over. We have no idea. Are we dealing with a lone individual, or was this part of a greater network? Was he receiving support and comfort and technical advice from a greater group?
Tracy, put on the old CIA and FBI hat and follow the breadcrumbs here. What stands out?
You know, I actually agree with Charles. I think the first thing that stood out to me actually when I looked at the affidavit was that he was continuing to acquire items even after these devices were found. That really did stand out to me. Also, the fact, and again, I'm not lumping all gamers into sort of one group, if you will, but the fact that he was on the online gaming community, I do want to understand what his Discord chats looked like. Was he in other groups? I think it's going to be really, really important to determine who else he was talking to, and was he part of a larger network?
By the way, to consider this whole needle in the haystack concept, one of the ways that they were able to get to him was the license plate. There's 337,000, roughly, registered vehicles in Washington, D.C. alone, and that doesn't even count nearby Maryland and nearby Virginia. Just for a little context, one of the pieces of evidence there. Tracy Walder, Charles Marino, hope you have a great weekend. Thanks for being with us tonight. Appreciate it. Talk soon. Still to come here on the Hill. Other side, the redistricting wars exploding again. New maps that could decide the future of Congress before you ever cast a vote. Our election expert, host of the Hill Sunday, Chris Stirewalt, with me on the other side. Plus this.
They're very small. They're really cute. And I said, how would that do in this country? And everyone seems to think good, but you're not allowed to build them.
President Trump given the green light to build tiny cars, as he puts them. But the cars could face some speed bumps before they ever hit the road. And a major change for newborn vaccine recommendations. What the CDC is now saying about hepatitis B and why it's ignited some controversy nationwide. I'm Blake Burman. Thank you for being with us on this Friday night. A lot to get to still. Other side of the break, 4 minutes out. All right, so the redistricting battle's heating up again with control of Congress hanging in the balance. Now we're talking about Indiana because the House of Representatives there in the state passing a bill that would allow the Hoosier state to move forward with redistricting. Republicans there have proposed a new congressional map that would redraw the lines of 2 districts. You see right there, there's still 2 blue districts there, potentially giving the GOP an advantage in next year's midterms. The bill then goes to the Republican-controlled Senate, and then there's a whole lot of back and forth there and pressure as well for them to get it done. It would then join the states like Texas and California that are redrawing their lines. Luke is hanging with me on a Friday night. Chris Stirewalt, host of the Hill Sunday, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Hello, sir.
Professor.
Let's look at this a couple ways. You've got 2 blue dots there out of 9, and that's what they're going after right now.
Right. So you could call one dot Gary, and you could call the other dot Indianapolis.
Right.
And for Republicans, they feel the pressure to do this in Indiana because they've screwed it up, right? So they kicked off this thing down in Texas, and they said, we're gonna grab 5 seats, and you dumb Democrats, you're just gonna have to lump it. And they kicked off something that now is not adding up to very much for Republicans, so they're having to squeeze blood out of every turnip, and that means Gary, Indiana, and Indianapolis, Indiana.
So I'm looking at this, Chris, and if you go to the left side, if you look at the, where are we? Over here, left side. I see a whole lot of blue.
Yeah.
Back in 1990, early 90s, and now you're looking at the Hoosier State there potentially all red. Tell me the story here. What happened over time in a once sort of purple Midwest state?
Democrats lost white working class voters. In 2008, you see there, that was when Barack Obama won Indiana, the only Democrat to win Indiana since 1964. And it was like, oh, is something happening here? But what we have seen subsequently in Indiana is that as white, rural, and small town America got more and more Republican, that's a lot of Indiana, and that's reflected in what you see in the map now.
By the way, Turning Point is putting some attention behind that race, trying to persuade the Indiana Senate to push forward these
and they don't want to do it because people hate gerrymandering.
Right.
And they were able to sell it in California because they said, we have to do it to get back at Texas. In Indiana, it's a tougher sell because you're saying, we want you to do something people hate and that is unpopular and is going to put some of your own members at risk, but we need to do it because we have to win the House of Representatives, and that's a tougher sell.
So let's go to the map all across the country as we talk about California and Texas. If this is a 9-inning game, Chris, we're what, like the bottom of the 6th right now, probably somewhere in there, and what's the score?
Well, if we net it all out, we're probably talking about, if the election were held today, that this will have been worth nationally, thanks to the Supreme Court's decision, be nationally worth probably 3 seats maybe for Republicans. Because the Virginia Democrats just put out their map, and they're doing double back at the Republicans what the Republicans are doing to them. So we will have gone through all of this. We will have subjected the people of the United States to all of this. We will have screwed up all these representative lines, and we will end up with a shift of, we're talking about 2 or 3 seats.
It's all race to the bottom stuff, right?
Totally.
And you get both parties saying it. But the reason why they are going through all of this, as you and I both know, is because of this. It's the slimmest margin in modern political history, and that 3, in theory. Now we'll see what the world looks like in November and the economy and all sorts of things. But in theory, that could be the 3 to swing it, maybe.
Yeah, if the election was held today, the 3 wouldn't be.
You think this looks like that?
Yeah, it's like 30 seats.
Okay.
Right, and so whether you lose the majority by 27 seats or 30 seats, you've lost it big. The Republicans started this when they were envisioning a year that was going to be like 2022 was for Democrats. We're going to play it at the margins. We're going to cut it here. We're going to cut it there. The Republicans have a bigger problem, which is they need a directional and attitudinal change in the country. People are very down on the incumbent president. They're very down on the direction of the economy. They're very upset about a lot of things. And so they want to put an old-fashioned whooping on the party in power. And Democrats are more than happy to stand around with their hands out and say, vote for change with us.
You'll be talking about this on Sunday morning. You have the best Sunday show in the biz, Hill Sunday, 10 a.m. Eastern. You have the governor of the great state of Oklahoma.
He's also the new chairman of the National Governors Association, and he's trying to do some interesting bipartisan, sort of nonpartisan work to get the states together to be a source of solution and power to balance off Washington, and it's interesting to me.
10 a.m. Eastern here on News Nation. Chris Steyerwalt, host of the Hill Sunday. Thank you, brother.
Heck yeah.
Appreciate it. Still to come. Before Sunday, rest of the show, 38 minutes left to go, including the dramatic 911 call from a McDonald's that led to the arrest of the suspected healthcare CEO killer Luigi Mangione in court. And our tiny cars. How about this? Tiny cars. Did you think that we were going to be talking about tiny cars?
I'd like to see you put me in one of those. That would be a real, that'd be a beaut.
But all of a sudden, President Trump today said, you know what, we're going to do this thing with the tiny cars. What's that all about? When the Hill returns. So how about this? Could tiny cars be headed for America's roads? The president pushing for newer, smaller cars to be manufactured in the United States. The president announcing today on social media, quote, I have just approved tiny cars to be built in America. He says they are of the very near future and inexpensive, safe, fuel efficient, and quite simply amazing. Start building them now, he says. Now, that would mark a big change to an American vehicle market famous for being big. Look at this, the top 5 best-selling vehicles in America right now, all trucks and SUVs. The Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy, today seeming to pump the brakes on some of this concept.
If there's a market for those vehicles, I want to give our manufacturers the opportunity to build those cars. Are they going to work on the freeways? Probably not. But again, vehicles that work in cities, and if that's where you drive, it could be a great solution for you. And by the way, much more affordable than other options that are on the market today.
Affordable indeed, considering the size of all this. Our Nancy Liu is live right now in Santa Monica, California. Nancy, I've been watching you talk about these vehicles. Tiny is certainly one way to describe it.
Yeah, and Blake, this is the smallest car you can currently buy here in the U.S. This is a Fiat 500. It is just under 12 feet long. But President Trump, he's pushing to go even smaller. He really was taken by the K cars in Japan. That stands for, in Japanese, light or lightweight. And those max out at 11 feet. So we're talking a foot shorter than this car. President Trump, he was in Japan back in October. He saw those K cars on the road, and he thought, hey, why not have them in the U.S. too? So he even mentioned it this week during that news conference about fuel efficiency. He called K cars beautiful. Take a listen.
They're very small. They're really cute. And I said, how would that do in this country? And everyone seems to think good, but you're not allowed to build them. And I've authorized the secretary to immediately approve the production of those cars.
All right, so the Transportation Secretary, Duffy, he is on it, looking into it, seeing if it truly is feasible. The big question, Blake, is whether U.S. manufacturers will want to produce K cars. Will American consumers want K cars? The price will certainly be enticing. It'll probably be in the $20,000, $30,000 range. And the average car price right now is over $50,000. So it is a big savings, but you're losing a lot in vehicle size, I can tell you. I think in talking to customers, Blake, a lot of them have said, you know, it's just too small. They don't feel like they're safe. But, you know, if there's testing and they prove to be safe enough, then maybe give it a go.
We build big cars and trucks in this country. That would certainly indeed be a change. Our Nancy Liu live for us out west tonight. Nancy, thank you. By the way, speaking of change, a huge vote that could impact your child. In an 8-3 decision, Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s newly minted vaccine panel just voted to overturn a policy that's been around for more than 3 decades, axing the CDC's universal hepatitis B vaccine recommendations for all newborns. The panel saying that mothers who test negative for the virus during pregnancy could wait at least 2 months before giving their child the vaccine. The American Academy of Pediatrics and others have opposed changing that 30-year-plus policy. And how about this? The Republican senator, Bill Cassidy, coming out strongly against the decision today, too, saying as a liver doctor who has treated patients with hepatitis B for decades, this change to the vaccine schedule is a mistake. He says before the birth dose was recommended, 20,000 newborns a year were infected with hepatitis B. Now it's fewer than 20. Now, Secretary Kennedy has long argued that it doesn't make sense for a newborn to get the vaccine.
Why are we giving hepatitis B vaccine to a 1-day-old child? Hepatitis B, you know, the major vectors for that are it's sexually transmitted or by needles.
What he said here on News Nation as a presidential candidate. Our Natasha Zuves has the very latest on this decision today. Natasha?
Hi there, Blake. Yeah, this is an unprecedented move. It reverses decades of CDC guidance. The panel is recommending that women who test negative for hepatitis B can decide with their doctor on whether their baby gets that dose at birth, suggesting that first dose can be delayed until at least 2 months of age. Now, hepatitis B is an incurable infection. It can lead to liver disease, cancer, and death. According to data cited in the meeting, the vaccine has been given to 1.4 billion people in the last 3 decades. It has resulted in a 99% decline in hepatitis B in kids and young adults. You may remember this panel was handpicked by RFK Jr. after he fired all 17 members in June. That panel now includes some members who are considered controversial or skeptical of vaccines. The committee was clearly divided on this issue. Those who voted no, saying ending the universal birth vaccine will put kids at risk and that there just isn't enough data to support making this change. While other panelists agreed to study the data but still voted yes on altering the recommendations. Take a listen.
Parents should carefully think about whether they want to take the risk of giving another vaccine to their child.
If we deviate from the current recommended immunization schedule, which we have shown, or the CDC has shown, is beneficial, there is no evidence of harm.
You cannot say this is 100% without risk.
The American Medical Association, for its part, already slamming the vote, calling it reckless, saying it undermines decades of public confidence in a proven life-saving vaccine. Blake, it is important to note the committee only makes the recommendation, but acting CDC Director Jim O'Neill still has to sign this. He was installed by RFK Jr. He will have that final sign-off, Blake.
Natasha Zuvis breaking it down for us tonight. Natasha, thank you. With us now, Dr. Joel Warsh, a.k.a. The Gator, if you know him. He's a pediatrician and author of the book Between a Shot and a Hard Place. Doctor, thanks for being with us on this Friday evening. You are supportive of the decision that was made today, as I understand it. I was looking at that post that was sent out by Senator Cassidy, who's also Dr. Cassidy, and a Republican, and he called this a mistake. Why do you think he's wrong?
I think that we have to weigh the risks versus the benefits, and we do understand that there is a small risk to the child. So there will be a few kids that will get hepatitis B, but ultimately the decision of ACIP and public health is to weigh the risk versus the benefits. And we know that about 1 in a million kids to 1 in 7 million kids is at risk if the mom tests negative. But does that really mean that we have to give the vaccine to all 3 million kids that are born, especially now that we have great testing for moms? So in my opinion, and I think in a lot of people's opinion, the risks don't outweigh the benefits. And so I think at this point, it makes sense that we pull back on that recommendation a little bit and offer shared clinical decision-making. So you can still get it if you want it, but it's just not recommended for all babies.
You know, I look at this chart of hepatitis B cases, and it is a severe decline over the last 3 decades. We just had a measles outbreak in this country, Doctor. 1,828 confirmed cases in 42 states. Any concern that if this recommendation goes forward with hepatitis B, that it could move in the direction of measles?
I don't think we're going to see it move in the direction of measles. There are very, very few cases. We know it would be about maybe an additional 20 to 50 cases a year of hepatitis B. Of course, that's unfortunate, but you have to weigh that against the risks of giving every single kid a hepatitis B vaccine. Any fevers, seizures, encephalopathy. We know there are risks to any medication. And when the benefits are to so few kids, then public health has to weigh that risk. And any kid that gets sick is unfortunate, but ultimately giving this vaccine to every single kid is not something that every country in the world has decided to do. A lot of countries choose this risk-based decision-making.
You know, the CDC, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. getting a lot of attention, obviously. This panel, ACIP, was sort of brought into the forefront in COVID. You and I both remember that, right? They were the ones that were making the recommendations during that time. The secretary got rid of the whole panel and put 17 new people in. And it just leads me to the question of, Doctor, at the end of the day, no matter what the recommendation is or isn't on any issue, is it still the best guidance that any medical decision is between you and the doctor?
I think that's always the best decision, and that's why I think this is a reasonable decision. Shared clinical decision-making makes sense. Your doctor knows you the best, and you need to have those conversations and weigh the risks and benefits for your own child in your own specific situation. So yes, absolutely. The most important thing is that relationship with your doctor.
All right, we'll leave it there. Dr. Joel Warsh, his perspective. Again, a lot of pushback on this tonight. The other side, he just gave it to you. Doctor, thank you. Have a great weekend. Luigi Mangione, the man accused of murdering the United Healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson, had his evidence hearing delayed today after the judge announced that Mangione was ill. His defense is trying to throw out key evidence from his arrest at an Altoona, Pennsylvania McDonald's, arguing that police, they say, failed to give him his Miranda rights. This is New York City prosecutors released audio from the 911 call made by the manager at that store.
I have a customer here that some other customers were suspicious of, that he looks like the CEO shooter. The only thing you can see is his eyebrows, because I tried to Google it to try to calm them down a little bit. And I'm like, guys, it's kind of hard to tell with his eyes and his eyebrows.
Court expected to resume once again on Monday. So far, 7 witnesses, including prison guards and the arresting officers, have testified. Still to come. Other side of the break, President Trump, did you see this today? Center stage at the FIFA World Cup draw, the eyes of the world on him. where teams find out who they are going to play next summer. But what's the president's draw these days? The 4 big issues that are before him tonight, and the First Lady bringing some holiday cheer to a children's hospital. We'll show you and tell you what she did today.
This is your Peace Prize. There is also a beautiful medal for you that you can wear everywhere you want to go.
I'm going to wear it right now.
Okay, let me hold. Fantastic.
This is truly one of the great honors of my life. And beyond awards, John and I were discussing this. We saved millions and millions of lives.
All right, so you saw it there. President Trump receiving a Peace Prize today from FIFA at the World Cup draw. This as he weighs possible military action inside Venezuela. The United States resuming attacks on alleged drug boats. The Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, ordering a new strike Thursday. Southern Command saying 4 narco-terrorists killed in what is now the 22nd strike. Full panel here with me tonight on this Friday evening. Emily Brooks, congressional reporter for The Hill. Sean Spicer, NewsNation political contributor, host of the Sean Spicer Show podcast. And Scott Bolden, NewsNation political contributor. Gentlemen, hello. Happy Friday.
Thanks
for being here. Emily, hello. Your world this week was all about, or not all about, but a lot about Venezuela and the September 2nd strike and the admiral going up to the Hill to brief Congress. But what we saw from that video and Pete Hegseth yesterday was a reminder that Donald Trump, the commander-in-chief, has a really big decision still to make on Venezuela and what he does or does not do.
Yes, I mean, certainly he does not seem to want Maduro to still be leader of Venezuela. What exactly that means as far as any potential military action, you know, this is, I think, when I think about this issue, I think about what this means for the MAGA movement and what it means going forward and what it means after Trump and his support going forward. Because so much of the MAGA movement was made on this America First, non-interventionist type idea, but it seems to be a lot of more perhaps warming up to it. One of the biggest America First, America Only voices in Congress, Marjorie Taylor Greene, had a falling out with Trump in part over these kind of more anti-interventionist issues, and she's about to be gone. So interesting to see if that's going to be picked up in Congress at all.
Sean, Rand Paul called this a prelude to an invasion.
I think that's premature at best.
What do you think?
What the president showed us both in Gaza and Iran in particular is that there's a third way. That this idea that it's black and white, that you either have to invade, put boots on the ground, or do nothing is ridiculous. What he did in Iran was show us a new way, a new America First way, which is that you can serve America's national interests without necessarily a ton of cash or a ton of boots on the ground. And I think what he's done in Venezuela, and this is where I think, again, people are misreading this. He has basically gone to Maduro and made it very clear, I can remove you, I can attack, or you can do it the Trump way, which is leave. And I'm still not convinced that that Maduro doesn't take that option.
You think that happens by the end of the year?
I think that there's a strong possibility that Maduro sees the writing on the wall, sees the USS Gerald Ford strike group off the coast and the troops that are potentially could come in, and says, you know what, it's better that I leave and get some kind of deal to walk out of here alive with my family with probably a boatload of crypto. And by the way, that would once again prove that Trump has a third way, but it's not necessarily an either-or suggestion.
Scott, I sat here, to Sean's point, during the whole build-up to what the president may or may not do with Iran, and heard from a lot of Democrats that said, if we go in, there's going to be really bad things happen on the back end. And it didn't play out that way, and I wonder if you can envision a world where the president is successful with whatever he decides to do going forward.
But the president didn't go into Iran. He bombed some sites, some nuclear sites that were against our national interests and Israel's interests. In this particular case, he sure is spending a lot of money with fleets and military hardware off the coast. And what would his justification be for going in militarily? He could never explain that. Maduro, what's his incentive for leaving? He doesn't believe that we're going to invade him. And with the CAI, let me just say this, with the CAI operatives working there, now I could see that being an alternative where the Trump way, which is where I thought you were going, because if the CIA is there operating, authorized, and they create this movement and this removal, that's a win for Trump.
Yeah, and look, I mean, that's the thing. He has a lot of options to take Maduro out. You can use kinetic strikes off the coast. You continue to send him in off of the USS Gerald Ford Strike Group. There's a lot of things that he can do. He can use.
What would you bomb?
Well, first of all, there's a ton of cartel sites inside Venezuela that you could take out. Look, the bottom line is these people present, I mean, letting these drugs come ashore to the United States kills Americans. Preventively stopping the death of Americans and the flow of drugs into the United States is actually in our national interest.
But fentanyl isn't doing that, though. It's not flowing through Venezuela. No, why are we bombing? Well, why aren't we bombing some other site or threatening?
Well, Scott, if you got a list, Scott, I'll share it.
We'll start beyond Venezuela.
This is what you're hearing up on the Hill?
Yeah, so pretty much.
This is the unelected version.
So the president made the comment.
Emily's like, I worked all day just to hear that.
The president today, obviously the big event was down the road at the Kennedy Center, the World Cup draw. The eyes of the world, right, on this big soccer event coming up next summer. And it got me thinking, what's President Trump's draw right now? What is before the President of the United States? And Emily, here's what I came up with. Trump's issues draw. Prices, peace deals, which we heard him talk about, immigration, and jobs. Is that basically what's before him this evening?
I think when you're talking about the next election, yeah, certainly. And if you're going to pick one of those, I think what is Republicans in Congress who are looking at potentially losing their seats next election cycle, they are all thinking about this affordability issue.
Right, so they're going to prices there.
So they're going to prices there. But I do know, President Trump certainly wants to have these peace deals and wants to have that legacy and lasting legacy. But, for Republicans in Congress, they're looking at, we can't help you create this legacy if we don't keep the majority.
That's right. Well, here's the bottom line.
Did I get that draw right?
You did, but here's the bottom line, and Scott knows this from his background as well. You tell me what the economy looks like next July, mid to end of July, I'll tell you who wins the midterms. If people feel like their economic security and their personal security are in good shape, they'll keep the team that's on the field. If they don't, Democrats are going to have a good November. But that's it. That's the bottom line. All this investment that President Trump is worked hard to bring to America, if it gets through the pipeline, starts creating economic growth and job creation, Republicans are going to be great. But everything that they do, let rest with what happens next November. Next July.
Well, the president needs to get to getting, as my grandmother said, because the time is wasting. Listen, prices are up, unemployment is up, and he's driving it with the tariffs. And the other thing is this. I don't think America supports Donald Trump in the way he is implementing his immigration plan. The statistics show all of that. The reports are always saying that. And so I think that's just general displeasure, not with the economic lack of security, but also the how we're implementing immigration and removing people who are either here simply illegally or those who may be here legally, and we're painting them with a broad brush. I think America is just simply unhappy with his leadership.
You agree with the draw? Those are the issues. By the way, the president hits the road next week, going to be going to Pennsylvania.
And by the way, we got a great draw in FIFA today. That was fantastic, right?
Uruguay, Australia, the winner of 4 other teams in the U.S. top seed.
Soccer, the real football. Is soccer the real football? That's what
the president's talking about it. Scott, Sean, Emily, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Still to come, why California Governor Gavin Newsom snapping back today at Halle Berry. What's that all about? If you're just getting home, trying to catch up on today's top stories, some Hill headlines before we head out tonight. The Supreme Court to decide if the president can restrict birthright citizenship. That's one of the big stories today. The judges taking on a potentially historic case over the president's executive order ending birthright citizenship for children who don't have at least one parent with permanent legal status. A decision is expected by the summer. Also tonight, Newsom on Halle Berry criticism. She didn't know. If you watched our show last night, you know we got into this. Halle Berry ripping into the California governor for vetoing a bill that would have expanded menopause care. The governor saying now that it was all a big misunderstanding. Newsom says similar legislation will be included in next year's budget. And finally, the Vanderbilt QB, the star Diego Pavia, presses the president to expand the college football playoffs. That time of year, schools and fans hope that they make it into the postseason. Pavia, who's an absolute stud, going right to the commander-in-chief, jokingly asking him to sign an executive order to increase the number of teams that make the playoffs. To check those stories and more, all you have to do is head on over to thehill.com. You can sign the QR code as well. Scan it, rather, on our screen for our morning newsletter. All right. Before we head out tonight, the First Lady, Melania Trump, ringing in the holidays by visiting the children at Children's National Hospital in Washington, D.C., including this little girl who just had to rush in for a hug. Look at that. Amazing. She was there. The First Lady spent time meeting with Mr. and Mrs. Claus as well, and to read to children before passing on this message.
I'm sure Santa will visit all of you this Christmas and bring you a lot of toys. So I wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I wish you a lot of strength and love.
It follows a long tradition of First Ladies visiting the hospital over the years, showing there's at least one thing that will always remain bipartisan, supporting the kids. And I can tell you from a little too much personal experience, the folks over there at Children's National are heroes. They're amazing. Coming up on Elizabeth Vargas Reports, she is following the courtroom showdown between Michael Jordan and NASCAR. Do you know what this is all about? It is wild, involving NASCAR and the greatest of all time. That's coming up just seconds away here on News Nation. I thank you so much for being with us tonight here on the Hill. I'm Blake Burman. I send it over to Elizabeth right now.